Perfect. Now I have your number. Thanks.
Hey, I'm Robbie Kramer. You're listening to the Leverage Podcast, where we discuss using your social skills to hack dating, travel, finding your dream job, and becoming a complete man. What up, guys? Welcome back. We've got a OG in the house. It was funny recently. Recently I was doing a podcast with a guy named Austin Summers. I don't know if you heard about him, Eric, but
No.
He's like a younger dating coach, really good. And he called me not old school, but like mid school in terms of like, dating coaching and pickup or whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, because I've been doing this now for since 2007, 2008. But by the way, Eric Disco, welcome to the show. And
thanks, man.
we met back when we were both students and coaches at Pickup 101, which was I did that in 2006, 2007. I think that's when we met, correct?
Yeah, around there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's, I guess you could qualify that as mid school or even old school.
Yeah.
As you could say. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say old school would be like Mystery and David D'Angelo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to feel like I'm that old, but
right.
You run approachanxiety.com, and you've been coaching guys since, mid 2000s, like me, 2006, 2007. So
yep.
A long time, like 15 years we've been doing this shit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're just like, the wealth of information, knowledge bombs. Every time, we chat about stuff, anytime I see your content, it's always A++. So I'm shocked I haven't had you on the podcast, yet. So I'm really glad that we're finally doing it.
No, and I remember working with you back in the day. There was a pretty big crew at Pickup 101, a crew of instructors. We had like 10, 12 instructors at least at some point. And I think you were my favorite instructor there. I didn't actually get to work with you a lot because you were on the other side of the country, but I really appreciated your style, that you had this kind of fun, playful style, and the fact that you really went out there and did this stuff. It was amazing how many of these coaches we were working with actually didn't go out and talk to that many women. I was like, I like really worked to kind of get into this group, because they were pretty good coaches, but they didn't really go out and do this stuff as much themselves, as much as you think they did or would, right?
It was shocking how few of them did. And that's always why I respected you so much, because you really did your shit. I remember I think we coached in an LA workshop, but it's the first time. That was a lot of fun. But It was shocking. Yeah. Just like you said, how few of these guys actually got out there.
Yeah.
So how did you, give us the backstory? How'd you find your way into coaching, and what evolved since obviously we worked together?
Yeah. So the backstory on me was that I'd always kind of been peripherally interested in like dating, self-help stuff, all the way back for actually even before David D'Angelo, and kind of just learning these techniques and how they could help me. But none of them really had much of an effect on me in terms of helping me that much. I think, like a lot of people, I got excited when I read the game, and I was like, oh yeah, I can go out and do this stuff. This is amazing. And my experience, again, which I think was like a lot of guys, was you get super excited about this and you're like, this is amazing. Like everything makes sense, the way they're discussing it, how it works with women. And, you've seen other guys do it and you're like, this is the way to do it. And then you go out and try and do it yourself, and you just become paralyzed, like completely inhibited, and nothing comes out of your mouth. And even if you do try it, you're like this stuttering wreck. You're like, hi, and nothing comes off as you planned it in your mind, as good as it sounded in your mind. And eventually I learned this thing was called approach anxiety, right? And I made it my mission to get past this because at the time, no one was really talking about this. There was no real game plan on how to get past this. People would give a few sentences of advice, like, approach 1,000 girls.
Mm-hmm.
And none of it was very helpful in either understanding, where it was coming from or how to get past it. And so I made it that's why I registered approachanxiety.com, and I made it my mission to try and get past this, to figure out how to do this. And I would go to these weekend workshops. Like I did a workshop it was actually a pickup 101 workshop where you go out with these guys and they push you into doing all these approaches. And when they're there, it's like, you can do it. And then the next Monday I got back home and it was almost like I was back to square one. Like I felt like I couldn't do anything that they taught me in the workshop. Mm-hmm. And so my first thing that I tried was, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to do a single approach every single day. I'm going to forget about all techniques. I'm just going to walk up to a girl in the park and say, "Hey, I just saw you here and I wanted to come say hi. My name's Eric." Right. And the idea with not using any technique was that I'm not going to focus on how to do it. I'm just going to do it. And if I fail, who cares? And that was huge for me, in that I was able to do that for like 2 months or something straight approach every single day. Made me way more confident, but it didn't really help me. It didn't really change those feelings, like that feeling of inhibition. Like every time I saw a girl, like that tension you get, that where you get locked up and you're like, oh, and you feel all those feelings and you get all those negative thoughts. And I had started coaching because I was approaching women. I was interacting with women and I was getting better, but I wanted to figure out how to do it in a way where it was just a lot easier, a lot more seamless, where I could just do it anytime I wanted. If I see a girl, I could do it. And so as I was coaching, I found guys that were even more locked up than I was, guys that couldn't even ask a girl for directions, right? Or even a guy for directions. They were so locked up. And I was like, well, so, what can this guy do? Maybe he can stand next to a girl. Maybe he can, and I would work through kind of very like basic steps that not only would help you get past this, but something that you could practice consistently, right? So I moved away from the weekend workshop model because I felt like it didn't really help guys that much. In fact, it could hurt guys in some ways.
For me, I remember I was terrified to approach, and that's kind of the reason why I took my first Pickup 101 workshop. And same experience as you. I went to the workshop, did a bunch of approaches, went back home, couldn't do it. Came back, did another workshop, did a bunch of approaches, came back home, still couldn't do it. Went to the third workshop. And then finally, after that one, I could do it a little bit, but those feelings would just come back. And by this time I was, almost $10,000 in the hole from workshops. Obviously I got something out of them too, but the main thing that I was trying to get was just the ability to approach all the time. And those weekend workshops did not help for that. The only thing that helped was actually becoming a coach, forcing myself to do it because I had students and coaching every weekend. But without that, I don't know.
100%.
So,
yeah. And I felt like, and that was my experience with most guys that took the workshops, was that they would do that. And then you never hear from them again, even though we were like, hey, let us know how it's going. We're here for you after the workshop. And they would just stop. And my sense is that it was even kind of harmful to a certain extent, almost as if like you were trying to learn to ski and your instructor took you up to the top of like a double black diamond and was like, okay, we're going to ski down this, and your instructor's there. And so you do okay, but now you're at the top of another black diamond alone, and your body is just going like, no, don't do this. And so I shifted to this model of more like, what can these guys practice every single day, just a little bit on their own in much smaller, much more manageable increments, to get them more comfortable with approaching. So like, and these steps can be even broken down further, but like the first step was just going out every day, right? Going to all these different locations, finding where these women are, getting comfortable in these locations. The second step was to consistently practice positioning yourself next to a woman without saying anything to her. And for guys listening, this is something huge that you can do. Put yourself in her vicinity immediately when you see her, when you're attracted to her, right? You walk over to her, right, without thinking, and position yourself. And when you do this over and over, when you're attracted to women, you stop losing this thing where, instead of like standing back and thinking like, oh, there she is, she's so cute. What should I say to her? What should I do? That's what kills you right there, is that like thinking, that waiting.
Right in your head.
Yeah, exactly. And if you go back, we were earlier talking about mystery. He had this thing like the 3-second rule, like don't wait any longer than 3 seconds, which is great. But I call this the 0-second rule, because you're not even saying anything to her. Like instantly when you see her, you're going to walk over to her, and if she's like looking at like some food on a shelf, you're not going to face her, like in a supermarket, you're not going to face her. You're going to also think of some excuse to walk over and stand right next to her, face the same direction she's standing, pick up something off the shelf and look at it. So it's pretty natural. Mm-hmm. Most people wouldn't think anything of somebody walking up next to them and looking at something on a shelf in a grocery store, right? That happens all the time. So you're basically using these excuses to do this, and you practice this over and over again. And then once you start to get comfortable with that, you move on to saying one thing to this woman, very simple, and walking away. You might say, hey, have you tried this? Right? And walking away. Mm-hmm. And you can practice each of these steps over and over and over again until you're ready for the next level. And it's funny because I, gave this to my clients to do, and I was like, well, let me try it myself. And it helped so much. It was like, instead of seeing each woman and being like, all right, there she is, time to do this. It was like, okay, there she is, walk over. Maybe I'll take it to step 3, maybe step 4, and I'll play it by ear, and so it's not enough.
So much. It's great.
Exactly.
Because, you're a lot of this stuff, it's like exposure therapy, right? And if like you said, if you start on the double black diamond, you might be able to do it with a coach, but it's overexposure, right? You're just going to like shock your system. So I love these small steps you can take that you can do. Anyone could walk over and just stand next to someone, right? But it's so crazy how guys will freeze when they're confronted with the idea of like doing a full approach for the first time. So I love how you've kind of chunked it down into these manageable steps. And because with anything, you get past the first step, you're past it when it starts being boring and easy. You're like, yeah, I can stand next to her. Now, like I do that again, I don't say something. This is a waste of my time. So I should say something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it should be clear too, though, that I found, especially guys who are kind of newer to this stuff, like you have them do, they call them warm-ups, right? Like, okay, on your way to the bar, if you're going to talk to girls at the bar, ask 3 women for directions. And those guys actually, and it was with myself too, you don't really understand what that's doing for your body. You don't really understand the change that's happening in your body, how it's loosening you up, how it's making you more social. And once you do get better at that, you realize, wait, that stuff really helps a lot. That kind of ramping up into this social mode really does make a big difference.
Big time. Yeah. To try, it's social skills are kind of like a muscle. You don't exercise and you just go out there totally cold. It's going to show.
And the other side of it too, with, if you keep starting on the top of that double black diamond, you're going to start to hate skiing, right? It's not going to be fun for you, right? Just like you're going to, every time you get up on that slope, your body's going to tense up and you're going to be like, oh shit. All right. Time to ski. All right. I can do this. I can do this, you know, and that tension is going to translate to these women. They're going to see a tense guy walking up being like, hey, how are you? You know, and they're going to be like, what is this weirdo? He's not like relaxed. He's not, you know, but if you can do this gradually and have fun with it and make this a fun experience at each step of the way and be more relaxed, women are going to respond better to you. You're not going to hate approaching. It's like every time you see a woman, you're not going to be like, oh shit, I can't do this. You're going to be like, okay, there's a woman, you know, let's see what I can do. Let's have fun with this.
How often do you recommend, like, how often and how long should guys, like, let's say a guy's got really bad approach anxiety, and he's going to do the exercise of, you know, going and standing next to them and maybe saying, you know, one comment. How long do you sort of recommend guys do that? And, you know, just go to grocery stores, or what about if they see her like walking down the sidewalk, or when do you start recommending, you know, the chasing after them sort of stuff?
Yeah. So I recommend about 2 weeks at each level. Like, and each level you can kind of practice things like, let's say just going out. I mean, it can be tough to find the best locations to approach women, you know, make it your mission. Okay. I'm going to spend 2 weeks just finding all the best locations to meet women. I'm going to work on getting comfortable in these places. Right. Then maybe 2 weeks on positioning. And again, there's a lot of things you can work on in positioning. And I think you'll back me up on this, but the guys who are the best with women, that's actually the point where it's make it or break it, where even if you're amazing with a woman, if you're in a bar and you're thinking, okay, there's that woman on the other side of the bar, these guys aren't thinking like, what do I say to her? How do I, what could I do to impress her? He's thinking logistically, how do I get over to her? How do I position myself near her without looking like a dope and like walking over and be like, hey, I was coming here to say hi. Like, you want to come over and kind of just end up on that side of the bar and then turn to her and be like, hey, you look like you're thinking deep thoughts, or, hey, do you know what time this place closes, or whatever you're, if you're going to have more fun, you could say that too. Mm-hmm. Like, I almost wore that outfit today or whatever, but you don't want to, march over to the other side of the bar and be like weird about it. You can do that a little more if you're doing direct approaches, but even then it's like you're thinking about, how do I position my body? Right. So there's a lot you can practice at that stage before you move on to saying something. Right. And even then, if you do say something to women, I recommend still sometimes practicing just positioning, not always saying something every time. Give yourself that luxury of, you know what, this is my first time out today. I'm just going to position myself next to a woman, or I haven't, gone out and talked to women in a week. I'm going to start with just doing a bunch of positioning just to see how I feel and get back into it. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I think that'll make such a big difference for guys listening to this who are struggling with approach anxiety, because just having something that you can do that isn't a full approach to kind of work yourself up to that is vital.
Yep.
So, yeah. And previously my recommendation is always, just ask for the time or directions. But like you said, that can be tough for some guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not thinking, when you don't think about positioning, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is way more, how you position yourself is way more important than what you say. And your nonverbal communication, your body language, like if you scare her or creep her out because of your positioning, doesn't matter what you say, her initial reaction is, what the fuck, right? And you can recover from that if you're really good, but it's just such a, inefficient or not a good way to start the interaction compared to what you could.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things to consider there, right? You can, if you're like facing her dead on too much, right, it can be too intimidating for her, and it's difficult to have physical contact with her, like talking to her like this, from the side. You can touch her on the arm. You can, it's a lot easier to do that. You don't want to be too close to her in her space. But you also don't want to be too far, right? If I'm like 4 feet away from her, that kind of signals you should be afraid of me, because
Right.
this is right. Yeah. So the physical is huge.
Yeah. It's, that was some good stuff that, back in Pickup 101, those workshops, that was, super important, because you'd watch the guys come and kind of do it on their own. They were just horrible. And because guys don't think about that,
Yeah.
whenever I take a guy out approaching, that's the first thing I have to, it usually takes me like a good 30 minutes to 45 minutes to get him to position himself correctly.
Yeah.
Because there's so much shit going through their heads, so much anxiety a lot of the time, worrying about what to say or blah, blah, blah. And so positioning correctly, especially just trying to stop a girl who's moving, that can be very challenging for a lot of guys.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Anything you want to say about that? Because that's in my experience, like, and maybe we should go back a little bit too and kind of ask the question, why approach women during the day or at night? Why approach women at all? Because there's so many guys relying on online dating and failing. I mean, that's kind of the why. But so
Right.
why don't we talk about sort of the why? What like made you want to do it so bad? And then talk about
So
moving targets after.
yeah. So there, it's very difficult to learn optimal ways to interact with women through online dating. It's very difficult to learn to calibrate yourself and to try new things out with them, because you're interacting with these women. Let's say you get 2 dates a week. You're interacting with 2 women in person, and you have 2 opportunities to try some things out. Like, so for example, let's say, and this is a common problem with a lot of guys, let's say you're not getting sexual enough with her, right? If you keep the conversation like purely platonic and safe, she's going to get bored.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole interaction might not move in a sexual direction, right? So I might tell a guy, look, inject a little bit of sex into the conversation, right? Talk about sex, joke about sex, make something a little bit sexual. Let's just say that's his sticking point, for example. He's not getting sexual. If your only opportunity to do that is 2 single dates,
where you're nervous, trying to make something happen.
Exactly. And there's so much on the line, right? You're going to be spending an hour or 2 with this girl. And if you screw it up, then everything's going to get weird, and so you don't have room to practice and to screw it up. Whereas if you're able to approach women more regularly, and you practice, say, this part, getting a little bit sexual with a woman, you're going to creep some women out. That's okay. She's not going to die from it. It happens all the time. And neither are you. You'll be able to walk away from this and learn something, but you can learn to calibrate yourself. You can play around with these things and learn how to use them. And you can't do that on a single date, right?
Yeah.
And even more so, this learning is something that happens with your body, right? Your body gets used to these, it's like, playing basketball. It's like your body gets used to dribbling and shooting. It's very specific motions that you do over and over again. And if you're not practicing this with repetition, it's very hard to learn how to do that.
Totally. Yeah. I'm glad I asked you that, because it's so important. First of all, I love to compare this to a sport, because it is the same thing. It's muscle memory. And most of the stuff that when I got to a point where I was getting really consistent results in my dating life, it was all just, it felt like I was just pretty good at golf. And, had the muscle memory. I could go out, get consistent results, kind of shoot the same sort of scores all the time, for the metaphor, whatever. And yeah, guys think this is something they can kind of do in their head because it's like a conversational skill, but it's way more a physical skill than a conversational skill. And yeah, if you only have 2 tries a week, you're never going to get better from that. It's too much pressure.
Yeah.
It's like trying to golf and you're going to play 18 holes twice, and you're never going to hit balls in the driving range. Like, you're never going to get better, and you're going to hate golf. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And to take it even one step further, I do relationship coaching for guys. And, I even had a friend who was married and had all these issues with his wife. And we were trying to give him advice, and the advice was great. And he followed some of it, but he had never gone out and interacted with women in person to kind of practice some of this stuff. And so he was in this relationship and he didn't really have the feel for like, yes, this stuff works. Yes, if I, pull back a little bit, or if I mess with her a little bit, or if this stuff is going to, and I could give him that advice and he could try it, but then he would just keep losing ground, right? And so the only way or the best way I should say, to have stable control of your relationships is to have that foundation of being able to, have multiple interactions with women and realize, yes, it turns women on when I'm a little mysterious, when I'm bland and boring, that doesn't work. So maybe in this relationship, I should be a little mysterious, maybe I should go out 1 or 2 nights a week and not tell her where I'm going, or just be a little more cagey if she's, losing interest in the relationship. Right. But it's difficult if a guy,
if you don't do this stuff, you never really understand how to use sexual tension. You're afraid of it. And that's kind of when I started, I was like the typical, nice guy. I say that with quotes because I was just using nice as a way to get sex, which didn't really work. But I was scared of sexual tension. I didn't know how to play with it. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know how to kind of push, pull, and play with those energies that you learn from approaching. And there's no way to learn it without approaching. Like, you have to get comfortable in that environment. And I mean, yeah, obviously you can learn it on dates, but if you're only getting 2 dates a week and you're just not going to learn it. Right. And most of the guys, the quote unquote naturals, were just guys that learned this at a very young age, because they were either like tall or good looking, early on in school, and they got a lot of attention from chicks, and, they learned how to play with these energies. And, I that was not my case. I had to learn this stuff kind of later, because the only thing I knew was the nice guy approach, which never worked. And the other thing that you said was really important is you have to allow yourself and expect that you're going to go through what I call the creepy zone, right? Like, if you're a guy who's getting friend zoned a lot, there is no way to stop that unless you go through the creepy zone, where you're going to fucking creep girls out. And that should be your goal almost, is once you kind of get past approach anxiety where it's manageable and you can do it, like, you should kind of start to just embrace being creepy, because what happens, you're only creepy if you don't know that you're creepy. Right. And most guys that, they don't know. So if you intentionally try to be creepy, a lot of the times you won't be creepy, and you'll just be kind of using sexual tension, and you'll be getting over the creepiness, and you'll be moving through that zone. And then, once you get past it, it's very rare that you're ever creepy, unless some girl sort of misunderstands what you're doing. But if you're trying to be creepy on dates, like, you just too much pressure. You can get banned from like Tinder or some of these sites. You could, who knows? Now in the US, you get the cops called on you, right? Like, if you just approach a girl on the street, you're a little creepy, it's no big deal. Like, you just, whatever, you walk away, you can run away.
There's that zone you want to be in, right? Where, if too friendly, and, she's not going to see you as a sexual potential mate, and too aggressive, too, sexual, too over the top, and she's going to get creeped out. Right. And there's no way, if you just try and like push slightly past the friends one, you're never going to really figure out that zone with women. You're never going to figure out how you yourself are comfortable expressing your sexuality, what women respond to for you, because it's different for everybody, right? Like something you do might work differently than something I do, right? And so you want to figure out for yourself what is your optimal zone, how to play with that zone. Yeah, and there's no way to know that zone without going past it a couple times, being like, oh, like feeling like crap, getting like rejected or getting blown out, which is painful, and I also advise guys on dealing with that too, like how you deal with rejection, how you deal with those feelings. But yeah, there's no way to learn without pushing past that.
Yeah, it's like there's no way. It's like approach anxiety. There's no way around it. You just got to go through it. There's no way around feeling creepy or being creepy. You just got to go through the process, and then you get past it, right? It's just like a part of the journey, right? It's like you said, with sports, like if you don't learn how to dribble in basketball, right? When you first try, you're probably going to fuck it up a lot of times, but
exactly,
becomes second nature. Yeah. And what you said too is, I think this is the most important thing, is there's so many guys that got into a relationship at a young age, maybe it was a high school sweetheart or whatever, never really learned this stuff. Maybe, whatever, there was some attraction there to begin with, but as time goes by, those relationships can deteriorate. And then if you don't know what attracted your wife to you in the first place, odds are like that's going to go away and she'll cheat on you, leave you. Like there's so many stories of guys just getting totally destroyed by women because they didn't know how to do these things. Like they didn't know how to like manage those relationships, which you learn from this,
Right.
And it's sad to see it, but eventually you do have to learn. So
yeah.
Okay, so going back to kind of the next step in approaching, like if you have a girl who's moving, or what's the...
Oh yeah, so we were talking about walking women. Mm-hmm. So this is interesting, and I've tried this like a whole bunch of different ways, and there's certainly more than one way to skin a cat, right? So let's say a woman walking down the sidewalk. Let's say you want to start with her walking toward you. Yeah. So let's say she's walking toward you. So there's two ways to do this. One way is to kind of stop her in her tracks. So let's say we're being indirect and you see this cute woman walking towards you on the sidewalk. Being indirect, what I would do, and let's say you're going to ask her for directions. That's how you're going to stop her. So what I would do is I would stand on the sidewalk and maybe face at like a 90-degree angle from her, and just kind of look around, maybe at some of the street signs. And right when she gets to me, I would pretend I just noticed her, and I would kind of reach out and tap her on the arm and say, "Oh, hey, do you know how to get to the library from here?" Right? Mm-hmm. You could kind of get in her way if you wanted to. And so that's kind of the way I would stop her in that situation. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I like it. What I always tell guys, because when women are approaching, I think that's the toughest, when they're walking towards you,
Yeah.
And because it's pretty confrontational, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I found difficult. And I want to hear more about sort of the indirect stuff, because I always use indirect in like bar sort of high energy environments where it's normal to approach, right? Where it's socially acceptable to approach in a bar. Like, if you go up to someone on the street and you say, I saw you and I had to meet you, that's ballsy. But if you do that in a bar, not so ballsy, because people go there to meet people, right? So what I always did, because I just failed so many times with when they were kind of going towards me, is I would just let them pass. Mm-hmm. And then I would, get a good look, make sure they have a nice butt. And then I'd chase them down.
Yeah.
and kind of do the hook and swoop, swoop around them, get in front of them or on the side and kind of stop them, and then do something that was more like flirty and direct. But obviously, if you're chasing someone down, it's very hard to be indirect because they're like, will you chase me down to ask me for directions? Like, don't you have Google?
Right.
Right.
Right. Especially if she's seen you like walking toward her.
Right.
Then, yeah. So one thing I would do with this is when she's about, I don't know, 10 feet in front of me, 20 feet in front of me, I would time this. I would get a phone call. Oh, hold on. I got a phone call. Hello? And then, oh yeah, I would look around and be like, all right, yeah, I'm headed there now. And like right when she walks back, I would turn around. And so I'm walking right next to her now. I would put my phone away. And then now I'm walking next to her. Now I can kind of reach out, touch her on the arm, or just say something to her because we're walking next to each other. I might say, hey, do you know where the library is? Or you look like you're thinking really deep thoughts over here, or, something
so
like that.
Coming towards you, and then you time the call, then you walk with her.
Exactly. So as if
this is where all that positioning work will come in handy, because if you don't do that,
100%, you could practice this a bunch.
Right.
So basically what happens is the story is you were walking her direction. You got a phone call from your friend who wants you to go in the other direction. And so you spin around. It's actually kind of amazing, all the things you can do with your phone. Right. Hold on, I got a call. Hello? Yeah. and you pick up your phone. You can almost walk anywhere when you're on a phone call,
Totally.
It's kind of a nice cover for certain things, but yeah. And then you're walking next to her.
Yeah, that's great. Because it's so smooth. It's like totally, serendipity, as they say, right?
Yeah. Oh, look what just happened. Yeah.
Right. you know what? Hey, can you talk to this person?
Yeah. Can you talk to my friend? Like, yeah.
I used to do that with my buddy. He was great. Good wingman. We kind of developed this shtick where he would just like put me on the phone with the girl, and I would just game her for him, and vice versa. So,
awesome. I love it. Yeah. So me and my friend Lee, we'd have this whole shtick, which is actually pretty cool, that we developed. We called it toe-in.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a girl is sitting on a park bench, right? Let's say she's really attractive, and you walk over and you sit next to her and you talk to her. Now, what happens with really attractive women is she's going to assume you're attracted to her, that you went over there to talk to her, that, and so in that sense, you might as well be a little more direct, right? So if you want to be indirect and you have a wing, here's what we do. Let's say I want to interact with that girl. My friend Lee would walk over. He would actually pretend he's on the phone. He would walk over and be like, yeah, I'm in the park. Yeah. All right. You'll be here in 5 minutes, and sit down next to her, right? Put his phone down. Then I would come over 5 minutes later, or maybe not 5 minutes, maybe a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be like, oh, hey, man, what's up? And he would be like, hey, what's up, man? And I'd be like, all right, you ready to go? And he'd say, look who wrote me. This girl wrote me. And I'd be like, don't write her back. He'd be like, yeah, I got to write her back. Just take a seat. Oh, come on, man. Just sit down. And I'd be like, all right, hurry up. And I'd sit down next to this hot girl.
And this is total chick crack.
Yeah.
Like, and any girl listening to this has to get interested, because guys don't usually talk about that stuff. And
exactly.
Girls are, so fascinated with this sort of conversations. I love it.
And now I'm sitting next to this hot girl, and I didn't want to sit next to her. I just came over to see my friend, I might as well say something to her. I'd turn to her and say, can you believe this place today? Like, or whatever indirect opener. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a perfect cover.
Yeah.
Again, this is a little more advanced for guys, and you need a wing, but it's still pretty fun.
Oh, it's great. I love it. I would, yeah. Just hearing it, I'd be like, oh, let's do it. Cause yeah, that's always kind of the tough thing to overcome, is that sort of like investment gap, as I call it, right? Like, she has all the value being the hot girl, and you come over to now, get her interest or get her attention. You're investing, and trying to be clever and cool and interesting enough to warrant the investment back. But what you've just sort of engineered here is a way to basically give almost zero investment, but still start the conversation, which is huge.
And I would do this with clients too, where, on just a more simple scale, I would just walk over and sit one seat away from the girl. And I'd say, hey, in a minute or two, come over. And he would come over and he'd be like, hey, Eric. And then I would be like, grab a seat. He would sit down. And then it's a lot easier for him to talk to her rather than him walking all the way over, because that investment, and I like that word you used, does create more of this pressure, of this more, right? And that's kind of the problem with direct approaches, or I should say the challenge. I think direct approaches are great. It's a lot more investment, right? You're putting a lot more on the line.
Yeah.
And so if you can, at least when you're learning how to do this stuff, take away some of that or lose some of that, it can be really helpful.
Yeah. Did you ever remember 4 Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss? He had sort of like an elevator pitch in there as an approach. And I remember reading that, after I'd been a coach for a long time. And I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And I put a little spin on it. And basically the way I forgot what he said exactly, but the spin on it that I did was like, it's direct, but you see a girl, she's walking, she's sitting on a sidewalk, whatever, you stop her and you say, hey, I saw you and I had to risk embarrassing the hell out of myself to come meet you. And then, she's going to have a reaction, right? And even before you let her say anything, like, actually, I'm super late for a meeting. You look like you're busy as hell. How about this? Give me your number. If you don't like me, give me a fake one. And
that's great. I love it.
Love it. That's it. Right. Like there's no chance to like not know what to say. You don't even have to introduce yourself, or you can, right. But like, it's all just kind of, and this is such a numbers game anyways. Right. And either she's going to be like attracted or not. Plus the fake number line is so good.
That's great. I really like that. Yeah.
That's the best part, because it's like takes all the pressure off. But that's always kind of what I recommend to guys who are starting. It's like, just do that elevator pitch a bunch of times. Get to the point where, because it takes all the guesswork out of it. You don't have to worry about what to say next or any of that shit. And a lot of guys, they can do that once they get doing that a few times. And then sometimes they switch to like trying to have a conversation. They realize, actually, I was better doing the elevator pitch. But
oh, wow. Really interesting.
Yeah. It depends on the guy, of course. But indirect is more effective, but it takes a lot more skill, right? Because you have to be able to sort of pivot, and you have to be really good conversationally a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So to the point where, like I'll tell clients to do that if they want to learn, high energy sort of seduction thing, like bar game, night game, any sort of like festival sort of thing. Like that's kind of the next step. But do you have any thoughts on kind of improving at the indirect stuff, or improving, or, at that part of the conversation? Because that's where I feel like a lot of guys, maybe it doesn't matter as much as they think it does, but that's what gives them anxiety almost. It's like what am I going to say next after the opening line?
Well, let me kick this question back to you. What's your feeling on scripted conversation or adding scripted parts? As
long as there's no way for her to know it's scripted. So like if I use the line, I saw you and I had to risk embarrassing the hell of myself. That's a line. It's a script, but no one's going to call you out on that. Right. Yeah. Because it's it's actually what's happening. You're just kind of being honest and calling out the situation. Another line I use is like, if she looks at me weird, I'm like, yo, don't worry. I'm only like a third creepy. That's nice. Another thing I use in that situation, right? The fake number line, like everything I say is scripted to some degree because I've used it so many times, but she's never going to be like, that's a line. So and I think it's good it's great training wheels, of course. Like if you're not really good, it's really necessary to have something kind of in your back pocket that you aren't gonna, avoid doing it because you don't know what to say. So what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, there's a balance, and for every guy, it's going to be a little different. For some guys, one of the guys I'm coaching now, prefers to be very kind of unscripted and fun and spontaneous when he opens women. And the thing is, he's good at it too. You know, he'll say something funny, you know, and then he won't keep going with it, you know, but that part he has down, you know. For some guys, and this was my case, was I you know, I'd see that amazing woman and my brain would just lock up. Like I would rarely ever at that moment think of something good to say or just anything to say, you know, which is why, you know, I like how you described it as training wheels. I would say, you know, pick something, use it consistently, right? It's not, you don't have to use it for the rest of your life, but instead of always like thinking, like when you're, you know, if you're really locked up and inhibited and you've got all these feelings, like your brain is not going to come up with something clever at that point. Yeah. So a lot of times it helps to have that at the beginning. But you want to balance it, right? Because you do want to still kind of be spontaneous and allow yourself to come up with creative things. You don't always want to, you know, you don't want to be that robot and go from da 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 da, because she'll sense that too, right?
Right.
But so like, for example, with this guy who, you know, he was good at coming up with spontaneous openers. He wouldn't move on to the next thing. So we worked out kind of an interesting story for him to tell, right? That was kind of fun and playful. It was actually a true story that we worked out for him. And he would start using that after he did that spontaneous opener, right? So I think that like a script or having something to say can be particularly useful when you get to these sticking points. Like if you have a sticking point, have something memorized to say, you know, and say it. Like, let's say you're not getting personal. Well, maybe every woman you talk to say, hey, I get the feeling you're not from around here. Right. Mm-hmm. And now you're getting personal. Right.
Right.
And just having that in your back pocket can move things along.
Yeah. I think it's, you know, whatever you can do to eliminate the bullshit in your head that stops you from doing all this. You know, it's like at the end of the day, it is such a numbers game, and doing the more you do this, the better you're going to get, the more results you're going to get, the more natural it's going to be. And to just eliminate any sort of barrier to doing it more, I feel like is just the most important thing. Right.
Absolutely.
Like, and if, you know, and our brain is going to come up with anything it can possibly come up with to get us to not do it. Right.
Yep.
It's like the brain is one job, but what I heard, at least the reptilian part of your brain, is to keep you away from danger. Right. And we're programmed to be like, hot girl, if I talk to her, like someone might beat me up or something bad can happen. Right. Like that's like hardwired into our survival sort of reptilian brain. And so, you know, your mind will come up with the dumbest shit ever for not approaching. But like you said, if you can chunk this into manageable steps, I think you can turn that part of your brain off for long enough where you kind of get over it. And then approach anxiety, I think, at least for me, it sort of transforms into like excitement, right? I think like anxiety and excitement is just the opposite side of the same coin. Just depends how you label it, right? Like you go on a roller coaster for the first time as like a little kid, you're fucking scared as hell. And someone's got to like pull you on it. And then you realize, oh, that is actually I'm not anxious. I'm just excited now. And I'm having fun with it.
Absolutely.
You know?
And to bring the analogy back to sports, like the best athletes know how to get in the zone, right? The zone is, if you don't really care, you're not going to be as focused. And this happens with women I talk to. If I'm not that into her and I'm just like, blah, 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 I'm not going to be as focused. I'm not going to be coming up with clever things. But if I'm too challenged, right? Let's say I'm learning to play basketball against NBA players. I'm not going to do too well because I'm like, oh man, this is like too difficult for me, right? If I'm playing against maybe people my size and skill, I'm appropriately challenged, and that's where I'm going to perform the best, right? I'm not going to perform the best playing against third graders. You know, I'm going to perform the best playing against people at my skill level, and that applies to interacting with women as well, where you want to find that sweet spot, which is why I created these levels. You want to find that level where, okay, this is where I'm challenging myself right now. but it's not so overwhelming that I'm getting destroyed every single day that I go out there.
Right. Well, in your experience, how long do you think, or how long did it take you, and how long does it take your clients to kind of maybe not get over approach anxiety, but just have it be something that no longer stops them? Or for like someone listening, what could they expect?
So that's a great question. The way I normally answer that kind of question with clients when they're like, hey, when am I not going to be able to have this, anxiety? And so the first part of the answer is what you mentioned, which is it never really completely goes away. You still feel that like tingling. You still feel that self-doubt. You still feel some inhibitions in certain situations, and less in others. So it's variable. It's easier to answer a question like, how long is it going to take me to be able to get into conversations with a woman that I consider an 8, once a week? How long would that take me? Right. And again, that's going to be variable for every guy. For some guys, they might be able to do it in, 3-4 weeks, 5 weeks, or 6 weeks. For other guys, it may take longer. It may take 4 or 5 months, right? So it really depends on those factors. And it's certainly understandable that guys want to know how long it's going to take because they want to see that light at the end of the tunnel. But what I would say is set goals up, manageable goals that you can achieve by doing them, rather than getting a result from women. So instead of saying, I want to get 3 phone numbers every day, say, I want to ask 3 women for phone numbers every day. Mm-hmm. Right. And to me, that's a much wiser goal because it's something you can do no matter what. Right. Even if women don't give you their numbers, you can still ask for them.
Right. Yeah, that's so important because you can't set a goal that there's no certainty whether or not you can achieve it. But for sure, you can ask. Whether you get it or not is obviously up to her.
And to take that even further in terms of challenging yourself, I would say when you do decide like, hey, I'm going to go out, and I'm guessing you had this too. Like after when I first started going out doing this stuff, I was like, I'm going to approach 10 women every day, for the next 6 months. Right. And then you go out the next day and you're like, oh my God, I approached 1 woman and it was so hard. I'm going home. Right. And you feel like a failure. So my recommendation to guys is before setting a goal of what you're going to do every day. And again, consistency is key here. You really want to do it every day, if possible, or as many days a week as you can. Go out and do it for 1 day or 2 days and see how you feel. Right. If you can only, ask for directions from 3 different women and you feel like, okay, that's manageable. I think I could do that every day. Then make that your goal. I'm going to do that for the next 2 weeks. And then I'm going to move on to the next step, which is staying longer in conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important to not sort of overexert yourself, but still push yourself. And I kind of found that once I got comfortable doing this, and I was doing it all the time because I loved it, it became highly addictive. And there's so many guys I know, they just get completely addicted to day game, right? Because it's like, once you learn how to do it, you can just get dates all the time with like amazingly cute girls and you enjoy doing it. You're making people's day. You're having great. It's like the coolest thing you can fucking do. Like, and I realized I was doing about 25 approaches per week, maybe not all day, because I'd like to go out and I go to bars and clubs and that sort of thing. But when I was like really crushing my single life from before I was doing social circle stuff, like, eventually I kind of switched and transitioned to more like social circle game where you don't approach at all because you don't really need to. But before that, what allowed me to actually make that transition was doing like 25 of these a week. And I found that that's kind of like, if you can do 20 or even 15 a week, like your dating life is going to be completely insane.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
So yeah. we touched a little bit on like relationship management and obviously the importance of that and how approaching kind of ties into it. And we were talking a little bit about investment. So I wanted to kind of circle back to that a little bit. And, what are your thoughts on that? Like making sure that the level of interest is similar, or maybe that she's more slightly into you than you are into her.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty important. So what are your thoughts on?
Yeah. So it is important that she's a little bit more interested in you than you are into her. And I think that relationship tends to be the most stable configuration. And here's the reason why. It has to do with what men and women are attracted to, right? Men are more attracted to the physical, at least sexually. They're attracted to the physically. Obviously, you're going to be emotionally attracted to her as a person and interested in her. Whereas women, it's more confidence, personality. And if she's a little more into you than you are into her, you're going to be confident and she's going to be attracted to that. And so that configuration, if you lose confidence in yourself, if you lose confidence in whether she's into you, if you have that self-doubt as a guy, that's a lot more detrimental than it is to a girl, at least in terms of killing that attraction in a relationship.
Yeah. It's that's kind of the number one mistake I see with guys is they overinvest in, especially early in the game. Or guys that have the problem where they can get laid with hot girls, but they can't keep hot girls around. It's always an overinvestment problem.
Yep.
And it's so hard for some guys to fix this. Like I was coaching this guy and he was just like a horrible overinvestor. He'd triple text, quadruple text, ask girls out multiple times in a row. It's like, buddy, come on. How many times do I have to tell you to not do this stuff? Then we stopped working together. And then he called me just the other day and he was telling me about like this girl he flew to New York City to see, who has a boyfriend who's been avoiding meeting him, not like answering his texts. And he flew to New York City just to like maybe get a date with him. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like,
wow.
We went over this shit like a year ago when I was coaching you. Like, how do you go back to that just like horrible overinvestment? So, it can be tough for guys who are just so used to that. And this is a successful dude. Like he's a owner of a, successful tech company worth a lot of money, dates nice girls, but he'll focus on a girl he's really into and then just completely grossly overinvest. And that never works.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely better to calibrate how much, and it all comes down to initiative, right? Does she text you first sometimes? Does she invite you to hang out sometimes first? Are you texting like a paragraph back to her for every text she sends you? Right. And you want to keep it even or slightly less than she's doing if possible. And to me, it comes down to like my whole thing with relationship game is, it comes down to prizing yourself, is, viewing yourself as the prize in the relationship. Right. Mm. And so we can kind of take a basic example, like, let's say you're dating a girl and you text her one night and she doesn't text you back. Right. And again, this all depends on, your previous relationship with the girl, if how interested she is in this and that. But like, let's say you text her, earlier in the day and she doesn't text you back all day. Right. How do you respond to that? Now, my general advice on how to respond to that is take away the prize, right? If she misbehaves in this way, then you take away the prize, right? If I texted a girl and she didn't text me back, I wouldn't text her the next day or the day after. I would wait, right? I probably wouldn't text her again. I mean, who knows what happened if something happened to her, but I would actually go probably a long time or just not text her again, right? I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees, right?
Right.
If there's so much lack of interest there that she's not even going to return a text, then there's almost nothing to salvage in the relationship. And this goes back to being able to approach. I'd rather go out and meet a new woman than try and salvage this, right?
Totally.
So, but what I generally do is like, let's say she texts me back the next day. I wouldn't text her back right away. I might wait 8 hours to text her back, right? Or even longer, right?
Mirror
Because
her behavior in a sense.
What's that?
Mirror her behavior in a sense.
Exactly. Actually give her more back than she gave me. That's generally my, if she was like, hey, listen, I think we need to take a break. I think we should take a week break. I would say, you know what? That's a great idea. I think we should actually take 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Like
totally.
If she's trying to get space, you want to pull back even further and make her miss you, make her want you. Cause guys always like kind of fall for this like idea that you can somehow change her feelings by giving her more. And when it comes down to it, that's the only way you're really going to change her feelings is by pulling away. Now, again, when guys start dealing with these concepts, they overdo it, and you'll read relationship advice online like, oh, she said something that was a little inappropriate, break up with her, dump the girl, and it's like, no, you want to have these tools at your disposal to do it, to calibrate appropriately. If she says something inappropriate, maybe you pull away for 5 minutes or you know what I'm saying? It's not, you have to manage it, but, and guys, it's sort of like you said, when they approach, it's like when they first get into relationship management and try out these tools, they're going to overdo it. And that's okay. You're going to be a little bit too much of a hard ass, and that's okay.
Yeah. You got to find that sweet spot between asshole, nice guy, and
exactly
the mysterious, cool, dude who does well. Right. Like, and you're never always, you're never like there and you stay there. You're always going to be slightly drifting from, one side to the other, trying to find that equilibrium. So
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like having a child that misbehaves, it's like, you can't just, every time that child cries for candy, give it candy, right? The child wants discipline. He's going to be happier with discipline, right? Mm-hmm. But it can't be all discipline. You can't lock that kid in the basement when he says a swear word, it's like, you have to calibrate that so that the kid is happy. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, if you're not approaching and you don't have an active sort of dating funnel in your life, these situations become way more stressful, way more do or die. And it really affects your relationships. Like it's very hard to have a successful relationship if you can't do better, or if you can't go out and find someone else who's awesome. Like you're going to make compromises that you really shouldn't make. And like you said, you're going to be living, I like that analogy, living life on your knees versus on your feet, or standing on your feet versus living life on your knees. Exactly. Like if a girl's not responding to you and you double, triple text her, maybe she responds back, but she doesn't respect you. And maybe she sleeps with you, but most likely she's still going to not respect you. And that's going to lead to trouble later. Another client I have is dealing with, I mentioned to you, before we started the recording, just one-itis for like 3 years. And, she'll sleep with him occasionally, but then she always dumps him. And he's just caught up in that because she doesn't respect him. And that's never going to change unless he pulls away completely. And he won't listen to that. So
and the other thing you mentioned about having stress in that relationship, if you don't learn how to like manage relationships properly, calibrate to get, elicit the right reactions from her to teach her how to treat you. Like every time she does something, it's going to be so much more stressful for you. Like, you don't know, what do I do now? She did this, like, fuck, this is terrible. No, if you know how to respond to it, it still might be a little bit painful, but you're like, okay, I know how to handle this situation, and I'm empowered to do something with that. And even though it's painful, I am empowered, it's way worse if you don't have that power to do anything.
Right. Totally. Would you consider us red pill? What are your thoughts on that? I never know. Like when people ask, like, are you red pill? Like, I don't know. I think there's some benefits to the red pill community. Obviously, like, like not knowing these skills or not being aware of these dynamics. But what are your thoughts on the red pill stuff and how it kind of, it was like the seduction community. Now it's kind of a red pill. I don't even know how to describe it. But yeah.
So I had a client recently start reading a lot of that stuff. There's some great literature out there like Heartiste or Rollo Tomasi, and there's a lot of forums. And he started reading and came back to me like, do I have to be a dick with women all the time? Like, I can't cuddle with them. I can't, and I was like, nah, like, I kind of see that as, to go back to our analogy of, raising a kid. It's like pop culture is telling us, give your kid everything he wants. If he cries for candy, give it to him. Never say no. Always be, loving. And the red pill is like, no, you got to discipline your kid.
Right.
You have to,
hardcore
right.
Discipline.
And yeah, exactly. And then, but you can kind of go too far over to that other side of like, I gotta like be just a total hard ass all the time with women. I gotta, and just kind of getting too much. And especially if you're reading these forums, like most of these guys don't know what they're talking about. Like they're trying to calibrate, they're trying to learn, and they'll just go way over the top with this stuff. And so, you want to balance with that stuff. It's not all just being a hard ass. Yeah,
that's well said. And that's what I tell guys too. I usually recommend guys read The Rational Male, just because it's such a good, like, all-encompassing book to kind of infiltrate your head with this stuff. But then I always tell them to read Models by Mark Manson after that, because it removes a lot of the toxic sort of stuff in the red pill community.
Okay. All right.
And that's kind of a good, I don't know, I find that to be the good balance, and read them in that order too.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Yeah. But dude, it's been fucking awesome shooting the shit and talking about all this stuff. I love what you said about managing approach anxiety and how this relates. And if guys are listening to this 100%, like, if there's a feeling of I should do this, I need to do this, is something I've been wanting to do. Like, it's so important to actually do that, and your life will be forever transformed if you do. And where can guys, if they want help with this or they want to, check out your stuff, where can guys find you?
So I have a book on Amazon, and there's also an audiobook on Audible called She's 6 Steps Away. And that lays out the foundation for getting past approach anxiety, more details on some of the stuff we talked about today. And my website is approachanxiety.com. I also provide coaching, generally Skype coaching. And so if they want to get in contact with me, they can find me there.
Sweet. I'll have a link below so you guys can click the link.
Yeah. And I appreciate you having me here. It's great to reconnect with you.
Yeah, man. It's been fun. Lots of, I love talking to like all the guys I know from back in the day that, really understand this stuff. And plus, like, you add all the years we've been involved, and, it's cool that we're both still coaching.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Cool, bro.
Thanks for listening. If you want more, go to innerconfidence.com, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for the latest episodes.